Better? Excellent. Okay. Welcome back indeed. So part two, I'm going to talk about something quite different, which is a new application setting for homomorphic secret sharing. Okay, we refer to these as pseudorandom correlation generators. And I'm going to start by telling you things like, what are these things? Why do we care? And how do we build them? Okay, and to try to motivate, so let me go take you back to the succinct secure computation application of homomorphic secret sharing. So remember, just flashing up this picture again. Remember that after we did this mini computation, did the local homomorphic evaluation, at the end, we exchanged additive shares. Okay, we exchanged these shares and we got the circuit evaluation that we wanted. Okay, so the question now that I want to pose is, what if what we're trying to compute is actually additive shares? What if this was the goal? And essentially in that case, you can save this last computation, this communication step. You don't need to exchange shares and reconstruct, because what you're really after are the shares themselves. Okay, so this is good. Is this something that's ever actually desired? No. And it turns out it is. This is something that's highly motivated. And also, again, for secure computation applications. Okay, so to explain this, let me introduce you to the model of secure computation with preprocessing. So in this case, it's the same ultimate goal that we still have Alice and Bob who want to run secure computation to evaluate some circuit on their inputs. But it turns out if you split this into some first phase, a preprocessing phase, okay, that outputs, think of this as some magic dealer comes, generates this preprocessing, and now in the online phase, once the parties actually get their inputs, you can do this secure computation in a very effective way. Okay, so basically, if I have certain useful kinds of correlated randomness, now at the online time, once we get the values, we can do something that's fast as information theoretic in many cases, and with very low overhead. Okay, so this is good news, but then the question is, there's not a magic dealer who comes from the sky, otherwise we would have just had him securely compute our function and gone home. So when these are actually implemented, and by the way, this is the approach that typically is implemented. So in any sort of practical NPC implementation to date, basically it runs in this kind of setting. And so this part now actually also has to be securely computed. So we have still made some savings because, for example, these correlations have a useful sort of repetitive structure. Maybe you can target and just be able to make more efficient protocols for just these correlations and so forth. But overall, when you look at the cost of these protocols, this offline interactive phase tends to dominate the overall cost. Okay, so this is what I'm going to be talking about in this part is going to be a new direction. We're looking at secure computation with what we call silent preprocessing. Maybe this is a little debatable. But what we mean by this is the following. So if there was a way to, instead of, so in the previous slide we had these kind of long correlations, to instead come up with some correlated short seeds that now the parties could locally expand, okay, to some sort of pseudorandom versions of this correlation. Note that pseudorandomness is now going to be inherent, okay? Where this expansion procedure is silent in the sense that I'm doing it locally, I'm not actually communicating at all. Then this would give us the same useful functionality, but where this setup thing is now going to be much smaller, okay? Because instead of having to run some secure computation protocol to generate these long, massive correlations, it would suffice just to have a protocol to generate the short seeds and then locally extend. Okay, so here this ultimately gives you better communication and lower storage costs. For example, I just need to store this, and then when I know that I really do want to do a secure computation, I can do the expansion. Okay, so what does that mean? Translating back to the previous picture, roughly we have something like this, where what we're trying to do is a secure computation. Here this represents the pieces of the correlation. Okay, this is something that could be very, very big, and I don't want to have to actually communicate as much as this. I don't want to have to exchange anything over here. But if what we're really after is additive secretures of something, then this is what homomorphic secreture is already giving us. Okay? So all of this now is kind of motivation, and this motivates us to define some clean, let me introduce you to a clean primitive here of pseudorandom correlation generators. Okay, so recall, what is this? A regular pseudorandom generator, not here correlation, but just regular generator. So this is a cryptographic notion that takes a small seed, expands it out to something that's long and pseudorandom. Okay, in the sense that any polytime bounded distinguisher can't distinguish this from random. Okay, so for a pseudorandom correlation generator, this is going to be an analog. But now we think about so this is a correlation, say, across two parties. I want to think of short seeds that each of the parties receive, that they can locally expand it out, okay, with a couple properties. So this, say, a pseudorandom correlation generator is parameterized by some correlation. Okay, this is some distribution, joint distribution across the two. Okay, so clearly what I want to be able to expand here should be distributed in that fashion. But there's something that's a bit more challenging than just that. Okay, so for example, this, if I just had this line here, I could achieve this in a stupid way as follows. I could have both parties have identical seeds, and then the expansion procedure is just to expand out the seed, generate both parts of the distribution, and throw one part away. Okay, so this would give me the correlation if it matches the distribution, but here this is somewhat useless. Because these correlations for this secure computation, they're meaningful and they're useful because there's something here that when I see this part, I don't know something about your part. And this is the part, this is something that we would need to preserve for this to be useful. Okay, so here the challenge is that if I look at my seed S sub B, this should give no information on your expanded value beyond just what my expanded value is. Okay, so for example, say that these are Beaver triples, for those who are familiar. What is the distribution of Beaver triples? It's a bunch of additive secretures of random A, random B, and their product AB. So it should be that when I see my shares, I don't know what your shares are at all, up to the fact that it has this structure. Okay, so what do we know about these pseudorandom correlation generators? Well, probably if you look back, maybe this is around the first time things of this sort could be interpreted as this. For linear correlations, very simple things. Last year, we showed a construction for something called vector OLE, which you'll experience today. Okay, and here's the spew of everything. So this was a work that was recently at Crypto, where we took a look and we had a lot of different types of things, more general results, also more targeted, concrete efficiency results, and so forth. So for today, I want to tell you a little bit about two of these different parts. One is a generic construction via homomorphic secret sharing, and another one for this vector OLE. Okay, so let me start with this one, the generic. So in that case, then you can actually just do that more directly. For example, with regular pseudorandom generators would be fine. If it says that what I get and what you get should be the same, then you can emulate that. For example, with Good. Let me give some examples. Okay, so let me give some examples of useful correlations. Exactly, this could maybe give a better handle. And it turns out that actually a lot of correlations that we care about or we want to use are of the form of an additive correlation. That is that there's some kind of master distribution R, and what we're really getting is additive secret shares from samples of that master distribution. Okay, so as an example, so Beaver triples, as I just mentioned. So here this distribution would be like random A, random B, and their product AB. Then another C, D, and C times D, and so forth. Just lots of these triples. Okay, but what I'm actually giving you is not these values, but additive shares of this. Also for those, if you heard of these things, things like authenticated Beaver triples or truth table correlations can also be expressed as this form. Okay, so I'm going to refer to these as additive correlations. And the point is that if I have homomorphic secret sharing for an appropriate class of programs, this will give me a pseudorandom correlation generator for these additive distributions. Okay? So this one is just a recap. It's identical to the homomorphic secret sharing slide from the beginning, except now I've rotated it 90 degrees. But why? Don't worry, there's no reason, because now I'm going to rotate this 90 degrees. Okay? So suppose that we had the following. Suppose that you have a homomorphic secret sharing scheme like this that can support homomorphic evaluation of the following program. Okay, so the program takes as input some seed. It evaluates a regular pseudorandom generator. Okay, and then, so now what is this? This is just a bunch of pseudorandomness. And it uses this pseudorandomness to sample from whatever this master distribution R was. Okay, so for example, for Beaver triples, it would take, these are random values, it would take the first two, write them down, and then multiply them. Then take the next two, write them down, and multiply them. Okay? So, if you have homomorphic secret sharing that can handle the homomorphic evaluation of this program, let's see how you get PCG from that. Okay, so think of so here when I'm talking about pseudorandom correlation generators and where do the seeds come from, well, for now, just think of this also as magically coming from a Beaver or something like that. I'll talk a bit later about how to actually generate them in a secure manner. Okay, so suppose that this dealer comes, sort of samples on his own some secret seed, and splits this using the homomorphic secret sharing scheme into these shares. Okay, and these, so this and this are going to be the shares, the two seeds to the PCG. Okay, so how do you evaluate this thing? We'll take this program. If each of us homomorphically evaluates that program, what do we get? We get some long strings, right? So the length is going to be comparable to this. And what are the strings actually themselves? Well, they're exactly additive shares. This is the correctness property of the HSS. They're exactly additive shares of this value. That if we had combined them together, we would get this program evaluated on the seed S. Okay, so does this construction make sense? Take that as yes. Okay, so this is a generic approach, and the question of interest is, can we do this efficiently? Because actually, if you throw heavy tools, for example, obfuscation or something, there are feasibility results. But can we get concretely efficient HSS for these types of programs? Is this something that we can hope for? And it's kind of interesting. Okay, so let's recap again. What is the state of the world of this thing? Do we have useful homomorphic secret sharing schemes that could support programs like this? And what's interesting is if you start now taking a look at what type of pseudorandom generators do you want? Well, we want something that's very, very low complexity, because then it's easier to support homomorphic evaluation. But the metrics, the standard metrics of complexity for ERGs, people look at all these low locality, depth, all these things, don't actually align directly with how expensive they are to evaluate homomorphically. Okay, so let's take a look at the pieces of the world, the HSS world. Okay, so for example, at the very top, this construction builds on top of FHE. Never mind, we already have constructions that are much cheaper than this. So coming down a little bit, this is getting faster in the sense that for some simple computations, we can get reasonably lightweight. But reasonably is like really not, like really reasonable, okay? The question, the goal, is can we get something interesting in this region? Because this region, objectively, this is fast, okay? But can we try to some level, okay, how fast? So for example, this is a work of Gordon, Katz, Gordon and all, let's do that. that have implemented these things. And for example, this is on the order of 200 million evaluations per second. So I'm actually reasonably legit here. Okay? So can we somehow support this type of pseudorandom generation with functions like this? Okay? And I'm going to go with, so what I'm going to present doesn't exactly fit into this framework, but it does if you sort of massage it a little bit. Okay? Or rather, there is one that is, and we can even improve a bit on that further. Okay, so ultimately what we have these completely efficient pseudorandom correlation generators based on LPM. Yes. Yes, exactly. So this for sure gives you feasibility based on reasonable assumptions. But to be more interesting, it's more interesting if we can try to get it to be practical. Yeah. So for example, what's sort of the motivation of this? There is a theory aspect, but also one of the motivations is to try to see if we can speed up these secret computation protocols. Okay. So for today, I do have a full hour, right? When did we start? Okay, I'll just keep talking until somebody picks me up, but feel free. Okay, good. So for today, I'll try to give construction for a cheap PCG, this pseudorandom correlation generator, for a particular correlation known as vector OLE. And then I'll touch a little bit on how you build on top of that to get correlation for Oblivious transform. Okay, so let me start with what on earth are these things. Okay, so vector OLE is a version of OLE, or Oblivious linear evaluation. There's always debate whether this is OLE or OLE, which sounds more festive, I suppose. Okay, so this is this OLE. So this is a functionality where you have one party has two inputs. So all of these are now field elements right now. This party has two field elements, this one inputs a field element and gets back this appropriate linear combination. Okay? And vector OLE is the analog of this, but where this A, B, and AX plus B are vectors. So here it's asymmetric, the X is a single field element still, but the rest are longer vectors. And each of these, if you can support them, have a lot of useful applications in secure computation of arithmetic circuits or vector operations for this one. Okay, so this is our goal now. Basically, we're viewing this as a correlation. So this, as I described, is a chosen input where he's actually saying this is my A, this is my B. But what we're going to do is to try to just generate pseudorandom versions of this, and this is still quite useful as a correlation. Okay, so the goal is to somehow build these pseudorandom correlation generators to come up with short seeds that can expand out, that give us this distribution of two pseudorandom vectors over here, a pseudorandom field element, and the corresponding linear combination. Okay, we're going to do this based on the LPN assumption, so learning paired with noise. Quite frequently, this is done over F2, but we're doing this typically over a larger field. Okay, and you can think of LPN as essentially the same thing as LWE, but with sparse noise as opposed to low magnitude. This is low in Hamming weight. Okay, what does it say? So it says roughly if I take some short secret, expand it out by some public matrix, and add this sparse noise. So this is certainly not statistically uniform, but the assumption is that even if I'm given M here, that this distribution is pseudorandom. And note that when we talk about LPM, so this is parameterized by a couple of things. In particular, it's parameterized by whatever the distribution of this matrix is, and also the distribution of the noise. For a particular regime, let me just say a few words about it. So here, when we're looking over larger fields, currently, as far as we're aware, there aren't any stronger attacks against the setting than versus over F2. So we're going to be looking at a case where our secret is relatively big, and important that the noise is, so it's kind of a low noise regime. That means it's an older assumption, but the noise rate, so this is sublinear instead of, say, like some constant fraction. But in this regime, let me emphasize that this noise is still, this constant epsilon is still bigger than 1/2. So what does that mean? This is a regime where we don't actually know how to build public key encryption from it. Okay, so this maybe you can, kind of an interesting thing actually, that, by the way, there's a bit of a sneak ahead, but, well, okay, I'll save it. Okay, so anyway, this is, who knows that it's not really a public key assumption as far as we know right now. For LPN, you mean over F2? The only thing that I know is that people have looked at both, and I don't know of any attacks that are better in this case. In fact, I think even there's one or two that leverage the fact that it's easier to attack if you're only at F2. So yeah, it still certainly needs to be further studied, but this, yeah. Okay. So this is the starting point, this is the assumption. And the one-liner, the takeaway, or the main idea, is that this assumption is essentially some form, you can view this as kind of a pseudo-random generator. So I'm taking some short secret and some noise that actually has a short description. This is the weird parody from my original slide, so it takes that information and it expands it out here to something pseudo-random. And the useful thing, the thing that I love when I look at this slide, when trying to build HSS and so forth, is that the majority of the computation here is some public linear operation. Okay, so this is true. Even M is not something that's secret, M is public. So roughly, the idea is we're going to try to leverage the linearity of this piece to reduce the problem to somehow dealing with this sparse noise. Okay, so let me start. There's two different constructions, sort of a primal and a dual. I'll mostly focus on the primal, and the dual is very analogous. Okay, so suppose that you, and now all of us together, we're going to start building these short seeds for the PCG. So the first thing I'm going to do, and I'm going to try to be consistent here, these are relatively short, so these are things that are okay to stick in these seeds versus the long outputs. So start with a short correlation of vector OLE. What does that mean? That means I've got some short vectors C and D. I've got some field element X and Cx plus D. Now suppose that each of us were to take these short versions and expand it out with this big matrix. Okay, so now we have, if we do these products, now I've got capital C, capital D, and some vector over here. These are longer vectors. And note that these vectors on their own already give me the correctness property that I need for vector OLE. That is that if I take C times this big capital C times X plus capital D, I get this vector over here that follows by linearity. Okay, but obviously this is not the end of the story, right? We do say both. And the problem is that security no longer holds. So what do I mean by this vector OLE security? It's no longer the case that whatever you're holding on to is pseudo-random with respect to my capital C and my capital D. I know too much information. I know that your values factor, for example, in this way. Or even maybe a better way to think about it, from the perspective of this guy, he knows that this capital C is not pseudo-random. Okay? He's lying in some lower dimensional subspace. So, well, that's good. Yeah, so for example, C and D are distinguishable from random. That's good because we haven't actually used the assumption yet. Okay? So how do I want to take something like this and get it to something that's pseudo-random using LPN? Okay, well, probably what I should do is I should add some sparse noise somewhere. Okay, so for example, suppose we do the following. So now this, I'm taking this part here. If I were to add some sparse noise to this, so this is something that now I'm thinking of sort of slowly building up information in the seed. The seed now will contain this little c, little d, and also this sparse noise description so far. And what's something you can tell me about this from the view of the other guy? Well, by LPN, this looks pseudo-random. He can't distinguish this value from a truly random value. So this is already good progress. Okay, so now what do I need to sort of close up the distribution? So I need to fill in some values for here and here so that correctness holds. Okay, and what is the correctness? So if you kind of rework these things, this was, so this is equal to this times this plus this. Equivalently, you can view this as if I take this and this essentially are additive shares of this product. And this is just kind of subtracting on the other side. Hopefully that makes sense. So with this viewpoint, then really what I want, so if this is some sparse noise, this is some B prime vector, this is what I need to get correctness here. Okay. And ultimately, so now, the point is that this, I've sort of reduced the problem to just this sparse situation. Okay, so again, kind of recap, what do we have? We're slowly building what the seed is going to look like. And now, so M is going to be some public thing. All of these little c, little d, and these guys here are going to be parts of the seeds. And now, all that I have to do in order to be finished is to find some way to succinctly, okay, so I need these to be short, to shortly give additive secret shares of this sparse noise times x. Okay, does this make sense? Okay, so this is now the new task. Okay, so here we can kind of even think of this. Really what we're trying to achieve now is exactly the vector OLE correlation, but where this vector is a special case where it's a sparse vector. Okay, so now this is what we have. Let's think of this case. So I have some sparse vector A prime, and you have some x. And what I want is some pieces, some short description, that can expand out exactly to these two vectors that were at the bottom. What were the vectors at the bottom? Well, recall, these, what I want are secret shares of this times the field element x. Okay, so to try to do this, somehow we want to be able to compress these secret shares. And to take it one step at a time, suppose that this wasn't, low Hamming-Weight, but was exactly Hamming-Weight 1. Okay, what if it had exactly one non-zero value? Now what do I want? I would want this to be some long pseudo-random string. It's supposed to be some share that's hiding this position. And this should be some string that's equal to this string everywhere except for exactly one point. Okay? Where in fact, I know that point. I don't need to hide the location of that point to this guy because he knows it's going to be, I have this sparse vector, I know it's going to be right here. Okay? So this, if you guys have heard of these things, might start smelling a little bit like, first of all, a pseudo-random function. Somehow I want some normal pseudo-random string. And I want this guy to learn that string everywhere except for exactly one point. Okay, and this, to achieve this, we can use what's known as a punctured pseudo-random function. So let me, I've got 2 slides now to explain what this is and why it makes sense that we might want this. Okay, and to start with that, let me, just in case you haven't seen, to start with regular pseudo-random functions. So pseudo-random function is basically the same version of a pseudo-random generator, but on steroids, in the sense that you want to be able to expand this out to something very, very, very long, possibly super polynomially long, but you want it to be able to have efficient access at individual input locations. So for example, if I want to access this, there's an efficient way of doing that without needing to expand the whole thing out. Okay, and so this notion is due back in the 80s, the GGM. And their construction was, if you take length doubling pseudorandom generator, you can sort of stack these up and form a tree, where in each case you go either left or right from the length doubled output. Okay, so this is a construction of a pseudorandom function. And now what does it mean to puncture such a thing? Okay, so to puncture it means so if I give you the seed S, the whole seed, then you can evaluate this at all possible inputs. But if I want to give you a punctured seed, punctured at a particular special point, say, so this is like some X star, okay? So to give you a punctured thing, this should somehow give you, I don't know, some pieces or some handicapped seed, this key, that allows you to evaluate the PRF on most of the points, but not on this punctured point, the special point X star. Okay? So it turns out that these have applications in all sorts of settings. And what's good for us is that you can achieve this puncturing of the PRF with a reasonably straightforward approach by just looking at this tree. Okay, so let me again describe, if there's anybody who hasn't seen this before. So to be a little bit more clear about what is this GGM tree, it takes the seed, it applies the pseudorandom generator that outputs something twice as long in length. Okay, that's pseudorandom. Then if you're evaluating left, you take the left chunk, use that as a seed, expand it out. Then if you're going left again, you take the chunk and so forth. So you can view this as a binary, full binary tree. Okay, so I should have given this actually as an exercise, right? So how do I somehow give you information that will allow you to evaluate this on all points except for one? And I'm not trying to hide the point, that's fine, you'll know what the point is. But whatever the evaluation at that point should be totally hidden from you. Okay, well since this is a one-sided talk, I'm going to give you the answer, which is the following. Okay, so suppose that this is the path to that special point here. What you can do is you can start evaluating this going left, going right, and so forth. Think about filling out this as if you were to fill out the whole tree. And now I cannot give you any point along this path because this will reveal information. In fact, if I give you a full evaluation along this path, you can go all the way beyond that. But if I give you the evaluations on all of the siblings of this path, okay, so for example here, if the special path goes to the right, when I go to the left, I can give you this evaluation, and giving you this evaluation allows you to fill in the rest of the subtree. Okay, so in the construction, I'll give you one of these for every layer in the tree. And what is it? It's the evaluation when you go the opposite direction as the special punctured path. Okay, so here, you can do this by the evaluations in the signal zones. And taking a look in terms of the efficiency of this, so what am I actually giving you? I'm giving you something the size of a seed for each level of the tree. So this is, say, the security parameter length for the seed times the depth of the tree. Okay, so try to now, not going to be restrained or whatever, how does this take us back to where we were? Well, remember what I wanted, my goal, was to somehow give concise descriptions of something that could be expanded to these long secret chairs of this value, this single non-zero value. Okay, so now how do I close it up? So for one of the parties, I'll just give the full pseudorandom function C. Okay, so what he'll generate is this entire PRF evaluation. And I'll give the other guy who knows already where's this special point, I'll give him a punctured key that will allow him to evaluate all of the red except for this point. And then to fill in that point, I'll give him exactly the evaluation that's needed. And what is that? I want it to be that if I take this thing, whatever is here, plus whatever is here, I should get, remember this is the product of the noise component, whatever the noise was in that position, times the third element x. Okay, so now we have all the pieces for the construction, for the primal construction. So remember, what were all the bits here? So we started with this small version of the correlation, the short CD and the x, cx plus d. I can give this guy this sparse A prime. Actually I skipped a step. Oh, keep me honest here. So I've given you the solution for if the sparse vector was a single non-zero value. Any ideas of how you can extend this? Because I don't want just a single. LPN is not secure if I only have one noise coordinate. How can I get secretures of lots of different noise coordinates? Okay. Well, one way to do that is to just take each of the noise coordinates separately and do this whole procedure for each of them separately. And now when you evaluate all of these, if you add them all up, this is going to give you secret shares of the sum of all of these vectors, which is what you want. Okay? So now what do we have? So this guy is given this random sparse vector A prime. And by the way, note that this, I've written it long, but because it's sparse, it can be described concisely. So this is also short. And the last piece was this collection. So this is actually denoting a seed here, a punctured seed for each one of these values, for each of the non-zero noise coordinates. And this one will also have a regular seed for each of the coordinates. Okay, and for the evaluation, what do I do? So this is now the seed, and down here is denoting how do I do this expansion. So for the expansion, for C, I take my little c, multiply it by the public matrix M, and add my sparse noise. And then for these two guys, what you do is you multiply by the public matrix, and then you take all of these seeds that you have, evaluate them completely, add them all up, and that's the value. Okay, so this is the construction for the final construction. I don't want to go into full detail with the dual construction. I'll tell you a little bit about it and then what the pros and the cons of the two things are.
This is a net restriction, basically the number of the coordinates, which related to the
Yes, exactly. Yeah, so the size of this is really the number of non-zero coordinates times log or whatever it is times the security margin. Okay, so let me start by saying what do I even mean by dual here? And this is sort of coming from the fact that LPN itself can be viewed in two different ways, either a primal way, which is how I presented it up till now, or equivalently with the dual version, the dual interpretation. Okay, so this was exactly the primal version, right? So short secret times public G, I'm calling it now, plus sparse noise looks uniform. Okay, for those of you who've seen some coding theory, or even if you haven't, so suppose that I take the kernel of this matrix. So what is that? That's all of the vectors that are orthogonal to all of the columns here. So if you're thinking of this as a generator matrix for a code, this is now the parity check matrix for that code. Okay, and if you multiply both of them by this matrix, what do you get? Okay, well down here, multiplying uniform by this is still uniform. But up here, exactly by definition of the kernel, this term, when I get the G times the kernel of G, it zeroes out. And exactly what I'm left with is that, which is the equivalent version, that if I take sparse noise and multiply it, so now I'm taking kind of a long sparse and I'm shrinking it a little bit, that this is pseudo-random. Okay? Good. So now the dual construction is going to be pretty analogous, except, for example, I don't even need to actually start with these short blue correlations. Instead, so here, what the final correlation is going to look like, I'll again have this sparse noise vector, and a bunch of these punctured pure FPs serving exactly the same purpose as before. So these are, if you expand these out, these are additive secret shares of this times x. Okay, and to get the pseudorandom version, I'm just going to multiply all of these things by this compressing parity check matrix. Okay, so yeah, this is, I guess, the transpose of some of these different things, but just to see them side by side, the primal versus the dual construction. Both of them are equivalent to LPN. Here, again, so remember that the LPN assumption is parameterized by things, in particular, say like the density of the noise, and also what is the distribution of where this A is coming from. So if LPN for A, this distribution is hard, sort of equivalently this is hard for the corresponding kernel distribution. Okay. Just a little bit, I'm not actually going to explain or justify this, but when you look at the constructions of our super-random correlation generators in the primal versus the dual case, there's various trade-offs. So for example, actually it turns out that the primal construction is limited to quadratic stretch. So if whatever your seed, this short seed size is for our PCGs, we're only going to be able to get quadratic and then you're stuck. And this is coming from, basically, if you try to extend further than that, you would need too many noise coordinates to be able to thwart, say, like a Gaussian attack, just sort of guessing non-noisy coordinates, in which case then you're not actually getting any expansion because you have the size of the seed grows with the noise coordinates. Okay, on the other hand, so the dual construction maybe is much better. It actually gives you potential for arbitrary stretch, although there's also various trade-offs. For example, you really have to kind of do all of the multiplication at once. You can't have an inverted sort of thing. Okay. So this is you've now successfully seen the pseudo-random correlation generator construction for vector OLE. I want to say a few things about this other type of correlation, oblivious transfer or OT correlations. Let me describe what they are in case you haven't seen them. So all of these things are very similar, related to each other. So for example, oblivious transfer, if you remember this OLE correlation, if not, then that's okay. But OLE is sort of a generalization of oblivious transfer over general fields. So oblivious transfer is this multiplication here over F2, where I have a selector bit, there's two messages, and I'm getting out, this could be expressed as exactly a linear combination of these two things. Okay, so people care a lot about oblivious transfer, at least, in the appropriate social circles. First of all, because this is a complete primitive for general sector computation, and as in many of these other cases, this is one of the things that if you have a fast generation of lots of OT correlations, then you can do fast sector computation. Okay? But indeed, yeah, so the issue is that you have to do lots of them. So this is something that is directly in line. This is motivated to try to generate pseudo-random correlation generators for this distribution, for this correlation. Oops, yeah, this is O3 actually. I had to. So I want to say one thing. So OT, something known as OT extension is used all over the place. Indeed, exactly for the task. This is something that dates back. So this is Shai Kushulevitz. Okay, Shai is this is totally my bad. Petron and okay, so anyway, what's the point? So here, OT extension is a technique that existed beforehand, which is very useful. It exactly gives you a similar sort of flavor of what we're after, where you want all of these OT correlations, because in the secure computation, you need one of these for every single multiplication gate you're going to do securely. And OT extension was a procedure that allowed you to do this, to generate lots of OTs, by doing a small number of these heavy lifting public key operations, together with a bunch of cheap symmetric key operations. So this is fantastic in many ways. It really, really cuts down the computational complexity of these things. But something that it does not do, that OT extension does not do, is cut down the communication complexity. So this is something where our PCGs are now slowly coming in and giving them a bit of a run for their money. Okay? So, for example, for OT extension, you still have to communicate something. If I want n and instances of this OT correlation, you still have to communicate back and forth something like n times security parameter. Okay, versus, so now, which I'll just say a little bit about, that with the PCGs that we have, we can achieve this with sublinear communication complexity. Okay, so this is what I'm going to say about it. So I can point you, if you're interested in the paper, this is a combination of the Crypto 2019 and the CCS 2019 papers. We have basically a two-round protocol that allows you to generate these things. So this is not only giving the correlation as we talked about, but also how to actually securely generate this correlation between the two of us without a dealer coming down and magically giving it to us. And so it's nice that once you've seen the construction for this vector OLE, it's actually basically, so once you generate the seeds, now the structure is almost the same thing as the vector OLE. Really, you actually just apply a hash function at the end and it ends up working out. So yeah, just to kind of keep moving quickly here, in this protocol, we can get active security with low overhead, which is pretty handy. And in the CCS version of the paper, we have an implementation. Okay. So actually, before I move on though, this is an interesting challenge here. It turns out that once you actually implement these things, so if you remember the constructions a little bit, the most expensive, the bottleneck for computation is really just doing this matrix product of taking this big code matrix and multiplying through. So because of that, you can, instead of just as like a baseline, you would take this, say, as a totally random matrix. This is typically when we talk about LPM, this is kind of the default of what is the distribution of this matrix. But if you're willing to consider different efficiency improvements, for example, you can take these codes and sample them from a different distribution where this matrix multiplication can be done much, much more efficiently. Okay, and this is something that's being done also a lot. So for example, if you take what's known as a quasi-cyclic matrix H, so quasi-cyclic codes, then you get so significant computational savings, and the assumption that you end up getting is like LPM with this code distribution, which is analogous to a lot of the current post-quantum candidates in some of these NIST submissions. Okay. Just as again, kind of the takeaway of this OT extension versus silent OT extension, there's not a clear winner yet, for sure. And roughly what the trade-off is that we get very low, or we can get very low communication, but the computation costs are higher. So it depends a little bit. Here are some numbers with some implementations that we had. For example, if you have really, really high bandwidth throughput, then ours is more good. Then ours is, yeah, okay, good, sorry. Good. Ours is more expensive. This cost here is not good for us. This is something like 9 times, this is log scale here. But as soon as you start getting into settings where your bandwidth limited, then we start really taking over. So even, for example, something pretty reasonable, like 100 megabytes per second, we already are 5 times faster. This is including the time cost of both the communication and the computation. Okay. And in terms of the communication, so this is a combined of all of the time. If you're looking at the communication, so for example, comparable things for OT extension, 160 megabytes versus for us it's 127 kilobytes. Okay, so this sort of bringing me to the end of my talk. Just to summarize, so what have we experienced together today? So if you forget or only remember one thing from this talk, you should remember this, this picture. This is homomorphic secret sharing, and there's a lot of really interesting directions, research, and applications, and questions still to be discovered. Okay? So well, we went into more technical detail with 2 different things. The first was this HSS for branching programs from lattices. So remember roughly, this is the structure here with this nearly linear decryption encryption scheme and additive secret shares of things times the secret key. Okay, the second part was this notion of pseudorandom correlation generators, generic construction from HSS that can homomorphically evaluate pseudorandom generators, and also this targeted construction from LPN, and a little bit about things beyond that. And let me close just with some open problems. There's so much that we still don't know in kind of an exciting way, I think. Just to categorize some of the directions, so a lot of things for trying to build this, get better constructions. Can we go, for example, beyond branching programs without fully homomorphic encryption? Is there some sort of analog? So this, in FHE, bootstrapping was a total game changer. Is there something that we can mimic in the secret sharing setting? Everything I've been talking about today has been in the two-party setting, in the sense that this image had a secret going into two pieces, the security against 1 to 2. So you can consider there's plenty of different notions and flavors here, with, for example, multiple parties, splitting this across multiple parties. Note, by the way, so if you still only require security against 1, then this is a weaker thing. For example, you can just ignore some of the parties, and this gives you a three-party solution with security against 1. But if you, even as soon as you go to 3 parties with security against 2, our knowledge, our current state of affairs is pretty pathetic. I even wrote it on the slide here. In the sense that, so a lot of, we can get things, now you can get instructions from multi-key fully homomorphic encryption, okay? And a lot of the more efficient constructions that we have, the techniques, for one reason or the other, really rely on the fact that there's 2 people. In particular, that if I have we have an additive secret sharing, say, of 0 or 1, then that means either we're holding exactly the same value, or we're holding something that's one separated from each other. And this is something that we really leverage in the constructions, and that totally breaks down if you need security against two parties. A lot of questions also, and this is also kind of interesting, there's such a span between totally theoretical questions, like what are the lower bounds, can you hope to achieve this from various assumptions, or can you show that something else is needed, all the way down to like very much more practical, we've got implementations in these works. So for example, also one mix of theory and practice for this notion of pseudorandom correlation generators. I think this is really interesting. This is something that we've only started picking up on for the last year or so. Can we achieve efficient constructions for other types of correlations? There's some that we're still kind of working on. For example, Beaver triples. So we'd like to be able to get these in a more effective way. Another, so this is more of a theory question here. If you recall, I gave you this generic construction. All of this homomorphic secret sharing stuff is pretty useful for trying to generate additive correlations, where what you're trying to get to can be expressed as additive signatures of some master correlation. But it's not even clear. There's other correlations that we don't know if we can express them in that way. For example, if you could think of, you know what this means, a garbled circuit correlation. This would be fantastic if we could generate this, but it doesn't look at all like an additive correlation. So what is the actual power of this class, even just as a theory question of correlations? And more broadly, so, all sorts of new applications keep popping up. What's going to be next? And for everything, better efficiency. And more, both from the theory to the practical constants and everything. All right, so thanks for surviving through with me, and I'll call this an end.
The typing is perfect, even if you don't do well. Any questions? We have time for one question.
Okay, so thank you for great talks. Could you explain again what is additive correlation?
Yes, So here by additive correlations, I mean ones where you can express them in the following manner. That there exists some, I'm calling this kind of a master distribution. So there is some distribution that's sort of in the clear, And what the actual correlation is sampling from that distribution and then additively secret sharing. So let me give a couple examples. So for example, these Beaver triples, the correlation, the ultimate correlation, are additive secret shares of these multiplication triples. So what we get, what we're looking at here, that if this position and this position are additive shares of some random value A, then this one and this one are additive shares of some random value B, and the third one is additive secret shares of the product of those two things, if we had them together. So for example, this is a distribution that can be expressed as an additive correlation. What is the master distribution here? What do I mean by this? So in that case, the master distribution would just be, like over here, AB, CD, E, F, and just a lot of these things where they're not split as shares. Does this make sense?
So the additive means share is additive?
Yes. That if I'm defining this ultimate distribution, there's kind of two pieces to it. First, you would sample from this, and then you would take each of these values component-wise and do a random additive secret sharing of that value across the two parties.
Okay, thank you.
Do you have any other questions?
I have a question about the puncture PRF.
The puncture PRF,
Puncture PRF, yes.
what about it?
In your presentation, you mentioned X star puncture. How to get the X star?
So I didn't hear the question. So about the puncture PRF, I mentioned something.
In your slide, you mentioned X star puncture.
X star, yes. It
How to
wasn't
get
written
X
on,
star?
I see. Let me show the slide and I'll tell you what I mean by that. So I mean, when you're puncturing it, I should have actually added this to the slide. So here's what a punctured PRF is. There's the standard way where you generate a regular seed for a PRF. This is normal. Okay, now there's an additional algorithm, say puncture, which takes as input a seed, a full-blown seed, and a special input, one input. So this is what I meant by the X star, and that would be, for example, this input here.
Yeah. How about the way you have a sparse noise? I mean, in your slide titled "Compressing Sparse Correlations," that you extend short VOLE into longer ones.
Over here?
Yes. Here you use the construction of puncture PRF to generate the shares of
Okay,
8 times
just a second.
X.
Okay, before you say anything further, my choice of calling it X star was a bad choice. Because I meant nothing related to this X. I just meant that there's some special input.
Okay. So how to get the seeds? Do they need interactions?
In order to actually generate these correlations, or how to use them?
You can check this offline.
Yeah, sorry, I'll be happy to sit down and talk with you.
It's okay. Let's take a 10 minutes break. Let's take a talk.